This is a user's roadmap to Workday Adaptive Planning for the SaaS industry. So thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Justin Desjardins. I'm an account executive here at Revelwood. I'm joined by my colleague, Haley Elliott, one of our senior pre-sales solutions consultants, who is going to be actually performing the overview demo of adaptive planning here in a few moments. I do want to just take a few minutes to give you an idea of what to expect today out of today's webinar. So before we get going, some background on our organization here at Revelwood. Some of you may already be familiar. We are a platinum solution provider for Workday, and we specialize in the Workday Adaptive Planning solution. We're one of 4 exclusive platinum partners serving North America. We were ranked the #1 partner in the Americas of 2022, solution provider of the year for 2023. We've done hundreds of adaptive planning implementations over the last few years, many of them being SaaS clients. We've been implementing FP&A solutions for 28 years now, so tons of deep experience for the Office of Finance across all industries. One thing to know about us is that we're really focused on customer self-sufficiency and getting you up to speed without relying on a third-party consultant after implementing adaptive planning. So I only have a few slides here as an overview of the platform before handing it to Haley. But adaptive planning is a place where you can do your modeling, reporting, and analytics all in one place. So everything that you need is in one solution, and it's going to act as your central source of truth, if you will. And typically, we're talking with finance teams, and of course, we're pulling in the general ledger data. But adaptive can connect to really any data source that you need to, because at the end of the day, data is data, and you'll be able to bring all of that data together into one place to model and report on it with confidence. Please do keep in mind that this will just be an overview demonstration of adaptive planning. It would be really hard to demonstrate the full power of adaptive in just a 45-minute webinar. This slide gives you an idea of some or many of the areas that you can plan and model your business using adaptive. It's not just limited to the core FP&A, but you can model out really any operational area of the business that you want with adaptive. Haley will ensure to dive somewhat deeper into this on the demonstration today. However, feel free to ask in the Q&A down below if you have any questions or topics you're interested in exploring, and we will be sure to schedule a tailored demonstration of our capabilities at a later date. And by the way, I actually should have mentioned this earlier. All of you will be on mute, so if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. Now, adaptive runs on the Elastic Hypercube technology, which is a patented Workday technology that is a key competitive differentiator. I'm not going to talk about technical specifics, of course, because it isn't important. But the reason it is key is because it makes the solution scalable, able to have an unlimited number of dimensions, an unlimited number of versions, scenarios, while still being able to be easy to use without coding or scripting needed to be run in the background. Many competitive products that you may be familiar with operate on multiple databases, which can cause reliance on IT or outside consultants to maintain the system. So ease of use and maintainability by the end user is a huge reason why adaptive planning has skyrocketed to 6,000 plus customers globally, and many of those organizations being scaling SaaS organizations who need a solution that is going to be powerful and scalable for the future, while also providing the ease of use that they need while the team is still lean. And as you will see in the demo today, everything is extremely intuitive with drag and drop functionality. So as you can see, these 6,000 plus customers are across all industries. And among those is over 1,000 high growth technology and software companies. And once again, you will definitely recognize some of the names here on this slide, but these are just logos that you will recognize that we included for that purpose. But keep in mind that the majority of adaptive planning customers are small and mid-sized businesses. And so wrapping up here, some highlights on the Workday side. Workday is a $5+ billion company that was ranked #1 on Forbes Future 50, #2 on Forbes World's Most Innovative. And part of that is because they reinvest such a large percentage of revenue back into the product. So this is a company that continues to grow and a product that continues to grow and improve. And this has been recognized by third-party research firms like Gartner and Forrester, being top ranked in many different categories. You can see that ease of use and customer experience being a big one and consistent across the board. So hopefully that helps with some background. At this point, I am going to finally pass it to Haley so that we can dive into the demo of Adaptive.
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and pop open my screen. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Haley Elliott, and as Justin just mentioned, I'm one of our pre-sale solutions consultants, which means I handle a lot of our demonstrations and kind of the technical side of getting y'all all up to speed on Adaptive. Have been working with Adaptive for about 2.5 years and actually spent the first year of that leading implementations, particularly in the SaaS area, as well as a couple of other industries too. That just means if you have additional questions outside of what I am showing, please feel free to pop those into the Q&A box. And I'll definitely try to get to as many as I can. If we can't get to them, then I'll get back to you over email. But let's go ahead and walk through what we're going to see today. So I'm going to start with some basics. One thing to know is that if you are looking for just FP&A basics, that kind of thing, we do have additional webinars that will go into more detail on kind of the basics of financial statements and that kind of thing. But for the purposes of today, I'm going to focus on our SaaS specific models. So taking a look at active dashboards and scenario analysis as it relates to software. And then we're going to dive quite a bit more into modeling than we'll typically do on a standard FP&A webinar. So we are going to look at everything that builds up into your revenue recognition model. So I know a lot of you probably hear ASC 606 and subscription waterfalls and cringe because you're doing it in Excel. I'm going to show you how to do it much easier within Adaptive. And to get there, we'll look at pipeline data, some integration in Adaptive, and a couple of elements around kind of capacity planning, and that'll lead us a little bit into sales planning as well. From there, I'll cap it off with 2 different types of reporting in Adaptive. So we'll take a look at both our in-browser reporting and our more formal board reporting. So I'm going to go ahead and take us directly into Adaptive so we can go ahead and get started. So this is my home screen when I come into Adaptive. I say my home screen because you can configure this to be whatever you want when someone signs in. So I want to see simple metrics, key KPIs around ARR. Maybe I want to see some things around cash or renewals or anything along those lines. Someone else might want to go straight to a report or a working screen, like a budgeting template they work with a lot. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're moving through, that everything we're seeing today can be configured both to your company and all the way down to individual users. So in terms of basics, we have 2 elements to what we call the foundational data model. And that's just a really fancy way to say the backbone of your planning process. And that's going to be your level structure and versions. So your level structure is going to be your organizational structure. A lot of times for SaaS organizations, you might have a regional component to that, your departments underneath, that kind of thing. So just start thinking about the organizational hierarchy that you like to plan by. So levels are going to be your first line of security in Adaptive. So for instance, if I maybe have an RSD or something like that, who's responsible for North America right here, I'll just assign them to that level. And then every single dashboard, report, and working screen or sheet is going to be automatically filtered to their level. They'll only see that level in their dropdown. And so that's a really great way to, one, reduce how many templates you're having to maintain, because you create one template for everything and it's filtered through the level structure. And then it takes out the issue of you having to manually consolidate all of these different departments, because as I make changes in North America, that's going to go ahead and roll up for me. So that's the level structure. I know a lot of y'all probably are involved in kind of higher positions or something along those lines. So level structure and adaptive is also super flexible. You can add additional levels or reorganizations at any point after implementation. The other piece here is going to be versions. So versions are unlimited and adaptive. You can load in as much data as you would like to. I actually have a client right now who has 11 terabytes of data in the system. That gives you a kind of mental picture of how much data you can actually put in here without impacting any sort of performance. So one other thing on versions, a lot of times you'll see versions with little lock icons. There will just be a black lock down in the bottom right-hand corner. And that just means it's probably a board-approved budget that you've chosen to lock down so that end users can't make changes to that data. You always have that to refer back to, but they are able to look at it and pull it into reports for comparison purposes, or go ahead and recreate it into kind of the next month's reforecast. So your 4+8, 5+7s, all that. So that's going to be levels and versions. So that'll kind of give you a picture of a lot of the different, or kind of a foundation as we move deeper into adaptive. So now we're going to dive into what we're seeing here on the screen before we kind of start moving into modeling. So dashboards in adaptive are called active dashboards for a couple of reasons. You're seeing a lot of metrics you're probably used to reporting off of. So a lot of standard KPIs, again, around ARR, kind of bringing in our marketing and pipeline data from maybe a Salesforce or a HubSpot to start looking at conversion rates and sales team efficiencies. But what I really want to call out is how dashboards actually turn static data into a story. So what you can actually do with any of these visuals is click on them and start to ask, where is this data coming from? So you have two different options. Anytime you click on a chart or a KPI, you're going to be able to explore data. So I just went into my hunter bookings or my net new bookings, and this is going to tell me a bunch of information about what time this is being generated from, if there are any dimensions tied to this data, what input sheets are driving it. So I'm not having to chase down what Excel template is generating my dashboard, and then an audit trail. So every single piece of data in adaptive has an audit trail attached to it so that you can always see who's made changes to the data, when they made the change, and what the change was. So think as you're scaling and bringing in people from the sales team and the marketing team and the ops team, you want to be able to track everyone in the system and tell who's actually impacting your final numbers. The other option here was just to drill down by dimension. So you can have as many dimensions in here as you want. I have some clients with 10, others with 200. So thinking scalability again. These drill down paths are all automatically created. So there is no coding involved in adaptive. I personally have 0 CS background and have implemented this for large enterprise companies. So basically, anytime you add a new dimension to a model, it's going to appear in your drop-down list to drill down by. So in this case, if I want to get more information about what segments my reps are expected to sell into, something like that, you can click into it and just continue drilling down as far as you'd like. So really great way, again, to start to figure out what's actually driving your final numbers. And then the other piece here that we'll get into a little bit more later is just the ability to bring your planning models directly onto dashboards. So we're going to talk about what's generating this final subscription waterfall on the right as we move through. But the purpose of bringing these sheets onto the dashboard is really scenario analysis. So if you start bringing on things like your bookings mix assumptions or your churn and renewal assumptions, that kind of thing, you can actually start to make changes to these sheets right on the dashboard and then see all of your metrics above update. The reason I call that out is because of a lot of other softwares on the market actually have separate databases for reporting and modeling. In this case, in Adaptive, it's all on one database. So right when you make changes to models, that's reflected immediately in your reports. You do not have to question, hey, did I remember to refresh my reports and aggregate data manually? The last thing I'll cover here is just if you ever want to build out a dashboard yourselves, something along those lines, it's all drag and drop. So you just come into edit, and then you can scroll down, just pick whatever chart you want to build out. And Adaptive is going to give you access to every single account in the system. So it's not just the financial data you're bringing over, but any sort of pipeline data you're bringing over, any data around reps and sales and that kind of thing. So think of marrying your operational data with your financial data as well. But anywho, that's the short of dashboards. From there, I'm going to go ahead and talk about modeling. So like I mentioned, we normally have a lot of clients in the SaaS space come to us saying, hey, I don't think I can bring a subscription waterfall process into a system. This is a 40-tab model in Excel. How is this going to work? And so I'm going to walk us through how you can actually generate your revenue waterfalls directly in Adaptive. So we are going to start just in an ARR sheet. So if I go ahead and come up to our North America department, we'll talk functionality and then talk a little bit about the value of this type of model. So this is kind of like our master ARR under contract. You keep in mind that we can customize any of these sheets. We're talking art of the possible right now. So the one thing I want to call out here specifically is green numbers and black numbers. So green numbers are actuals coming in from your source system. So an ERP, a billing system, really anything that you can think of. We do have a native integration platform that can connect to any source system and automate the load of those GL balances, transactions, recurring revenue, existing contracts, all of that. And then black numbers are your budget data that's either keyed in or calculated or modeled out on another sheet. So just want to call that out. The other thing you're going to see here are little blue triangles. So that just means this is a calculated field. So if you ever want to kind of write a calculation in Adaptive, it's all pretty straightforward English. So again, you're not having to learn a new coding language. This is strictly account-based, pretty similar to Excel syntax, but instead of saying C6 minus C287 in a different workbook, I can just see that, hey, I'm taking an account from my bottoms up model and subtracting out an account from my tops down model. So it gives you a very easy visual of kind of what components are actually driving your formulas. And if you ever want to write something more complex, because we all know modeling is not as simple as adding things together or subtracting them, you always have a nice little formula assistant to open up. The last thing I'll say before we talk about kind of the rest of the models that drive our final revenue that we're working towards is that if y'all are really attached to kind of your Excel shortcuts and hearing me click around is driving you absolutely insane, you still get all of those shortcuts. So you're not losing the kind of common functionality or ease of use that you might currently have in navigating through Excel. You're just moving that into more of a centralized single source of truth. That's a lot easier to collaborate in. So the last thing I want to say on this sheet before we move into kind of the first part of our revenue buildup is going to be our model triggers. So one really nice thing about Adaptive is that you can plan using multiple types of logic. So as most of us know, when we're forecasting out our revenue, especially in software, pipeline data is really only useful for the first quarter or so. Reps aren't always the most accurate after that point. So then we have to be able to tell the model, hey, for Q1 of my forecast, go ahead and rely on my pipeline mix. But after that, I either want you to switch to rep capacity, so our quotas, that kind of thing, or just a P times Q logic of how many units of something or how many new subscribers I'm expecting to acquire. So just thinking again, whatever type of logic you're currently using, even if you use different types for short range planning and long range planning, Adaptive can handle that. So for now, we are going to go ahead and dive into how are we actually generating all of this ARR metrics? How did we get to the revenue forecast? And we're going to start on short range planning, which, like I said, is typically based on our pipeline data. We'll connect to something like your Salesforce instance, your HubSpot, any CRM you're using, if you use NetSuite for that. But anyway, to get to our pipeline database sheet, I'm actually just going to right click and explore cell. And directly from my output sheet, I can click all the way through and get directly into my pipeline database. So a really nice way, again, to always be able to get from your output numbers back into what's actually generating those. I could have also gone the boring way and gone through sheets, but just kind of thinking again, outputs to inputs. So let's talk about short range planning, especially for revenue. We're going to start again, like I said, with our pipeline data. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is called a modeled sheet. It's going to be column based, which means we can drag whatever fields you want onto this sheet. These are just some common ones that we see around probability so that we can get your weighted pipeline metrics, start to look at terms so you can renew those deals over time. And one thing you'll also notice is little green triangles at the bottom of some of these. That's called a derived dimension. So Adaptive has a feature where you can actually say, hey, we don't track territory that well in our CRM. We need somewhere that we can clean that data up. And so Adaptive will just ask you to set different rules for, hey, if this is in this state, in this region, or this state, in this country, auto assign it to this territory. So kind of thinking of using Adaptive as, yes, a place to load your data, but a place to also standardize it, clean it up so that you have a clean database to report out of. So in terms of what's happening on this sheet, all of the calculations are going to happen in the back end. So if I go ahead and right click, row details, and scroll over to when we're expecting to actually close this deal, you'll go ahead and see that weighted ARR and our new MRR also weighted month over month. So again, this is what's going to drive the short-term part of our forecast. And you can also add, like I said, whatever fields you want, lead source, tie these opportunities to reps. Not really going to go too much into attainment today, but Adaptive does have full sales planning capability for quota, capacity, and territory planning. This is also a really nice jumping off sheet for that. The last thing I'll say here before we move into kind of the long range planning side of the house is that if you want to come in and say, we have this really big deal and we know maybe Justin was a little bit too ambitious in forecasting it's going to close in January, you can also come in and say, what happens if I change this to March instead? Save that off. And that's a new scenario I've just created. So you're not stuck with the static data you imported. That's just the base for you to start planning on. So that's going to be our short-term forecast. Long-term, like I mentioned, is typically going to come from your reps. So there are usually three components when we're talking about more the capacity planning side of the house. The first is going to be quota setting. So you can do this month over month, or I can go ahead and just say, hey, for 2022, I expect all of my SMB reps to hit $1.4 million, have a seasonality schedule to break that back, and some percentages to break it back into what products they actually need to be selling. So just one example, but you can absolutely plan quotas in different ways. From there, we usually have some sort of ramping schedule. So we understand that usually within the first 6 to 9 months, people are not at 100% attainment. So you'll typically be able to have some sort of schedule to say, hey, in this region, let's have SMB reps start at 25% and slowly ramp up over 6 or 7 months. So we move from quota into ramp. And finally, we'll actually have our total rep sheet. So what we'll typically do is integrate with your HRIS. We'll actually be able to bring in your entire existing employee roster, either by an automated integration or just by manually importing via Excel. Bunch of options there. But the idea is it'll also look like something like this, where you have a list of all of your reps. This is also what it would look like for your non-reps. And then if we come into anyone who's set to a default quota, you are actually able to come into row details and typically see their quota calculations. So this is how we're actually building up to what their ramped productive quota is. And that's what will flow into our long range plan. So short range pipeline, long range is going to be generated from this rep list. You do also always have the ability to enter custom quotas. So if you have someone who's maybe in their agreement negotiated a different quota structure, something like that, then you can absolutely set up that type of system as well. And then the last thing I'll say here is you do have the ability to actually split rows. So if I want to have multiple rows for Michael, I can absolutely do that to either move him across territories, promote him, something along those lines. So that's kind of a brief overview of a lot of the different modeling types in Adaptive. And that's what's eventually going to flow into our final subscription waterfall that I have right here on my dashboard. So just to quickly walk us through kind of how all of those sheets I just showed are summed together. Bookings are all of the sheets that we just built up are going to be summarized right here at the top. So yes, we have our net new opportunities and those quota targets for our hunters. Farmers are primarily going to work off renewals off of our pipeline. We'll have logic to actually renew any of those new business targets, so we don't just have them drop off after a year. And then all of that will flow down into our actual revenue waterfall based on how long we think those contracts are going to be. So this that I'm showing is kind of the more mature version of how we typically see SaaS revenue planning done. I will say that you can absolutely start with a simpler version of this. This is kind of like the final, hey, I have a lot of data. I'm ready to go to this step, but we can absolutely piecemeal this together so that this can be kind of your art of the possible final dream state. Cool. So that was kind of a brief overview of models in Adaptive. The other two pieces I just wanted to cover were two additional types of reporting in Adaptive, which is going to be our ad hoc web reports and Office Connect. So I'm going to go ahead and open up two of our web reports, which are found right here. I didn't mention this earlier, but your entire planning, reporting, and analytics process is in this one pane. So you should never have to sign into another system to complete any part of that process. But we'll go ahead and talk functionality here. So a couple of things. First, you're going to notice footnotes. So you are able to add notes throughout the entire budgeting process on any of those sheets that I showed and have them actually aggregate at the bottom of each of your reports. So this is super useful kind of at the end of the budgeting process when you want to be able to do a final review of everyone's numbers. Just pull those accounts onto a report and it'll go ahead and show you everyone's comments right at the bottom. If any of you are multi-currency, Adaptive will also handle all foreign exchange processes for you. So if you wanted to pivot an entire report into any of your other currencies, you can do that. You can do constant currency reporting. All of that is automated in the platform. As I said, with dashboards, you're always able to get more detail about what's happening in any of these kind of numbers we're seeing on the screen. So if you come in and see kind of a crazy variance like this with one of my expenses, or maybe I see a rep is really underperforming, their attainment is not as high, something along those lines. I can just drill into my actuals and drill all the way back into transactional detail without having to sign back into my ERP. So this is my transactions table. I'm not having to ping accounting to figure out what happened, anything like that. You can add whatever columns you want here, invoice ID, projects, products, anything along those lines as well. But again, thinking one area for you to do your entire planning and analytics process. The other option here is going to be to pivot this entire report by that drill down path that we also saw on our dashboard. In this case, I'll just say, hey, I want to see salary and wages by something like function, which is a different group of my reports. Go ahead and look at that. And without having to manually build out a different report, I can just come in and say, hey, I'm now looking at salary and wages by S&M, R&D, and G&A. You are able to also download these into Excel and PDF to distribute. But Adaptive does also give you up to 1,000 view-only users with your subscription. So you should be able to bring everyone in and kind of introduce accountability that way into your organization. Everyone should have access to be able to see how they're performing against their original budget. Last piece here is just going to be how they're built. Everything I'm showing on that screen is all drag and drop. So we have all of the elements from Adaptive available right here on the left. And all I have to do is say, hey, I actually want to bring one of my workforce planning accounts onto here. I want to see my FTEs. Just click and drag it on. So building out a report like this would probably take a minute or two, and you can really start to broaden out into other things like stacking all three of my financial statements, seeing anywhere there's a red flag that I need to identify, and also having all of my standard financial metrics calculated at the bottom of the same exact report. I am going to go into our last section now, which is Office Connect. So Office Connect is our plugin to the Microsoft Office 365 suite, which is going to include Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. The main purpose of this reporting type is going to be for your more formal board reporting packages or investor reporting packages, anything like that that needs to be a little bit more formally formatted or something along those lines. You do retain full Excel functionality here, but if I highlight linked cells, you're going to see blue cells and green cells. Blue cells are linked directly to Adaptive. Green cells are dynamic labels. So just to prove this out, if I wanted to see, okay, product revenue so far in March, we've sold about 8,500. I can actually explore cell, and this will take me directly back into Adaptive. So even from my final board reporting package, I'm still able to move back into Adaptive to see where these numbers are being generated from. If you have an existing report like this that you want to make dynamic, all of this is built off of drag and drop. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just highlight the rows you want to populate, pick the accounts from Adaptive. We have the same exact element pane that we had in the web reports available right over here. So I'll just go ahead and click and drag these accounts over, and we'll actually see all of those rows highlight blue. The next step here is those of you who build out these reports know that they take typically a very long time to build each month. In this case, all I have to do is come up into workbook properties, roll my report date forward to whatever month I want to do my board reporting package for. In this case, I'll do April, refresh, and we're going to see two things happen. First, we're going to see all of those lines of data I just dragged on populate and my labels update. So I have next month's board report. Same concept applies to all of your PowerPoint decks as well. You also have ad hoc functionality if you want to be able to expand any of these line items out. I just did it by account. You could also do it by level, by department, something along those lines. And then lastly, if you want to be able to generate this type of report, or if you have a sales attainment report that you want to spread across RSDs or your different regions or different departments, Adaptive will handle that slicing and dicing for you. All you have to do is come up to repeating reports, choose what levels you want to split this report out by. Right now, I'm just going to do the US, Brazil, and France. Create. And we're actually going to see 3 new tabs at the bottom, where I now have a formatted P&L for 3 other entities, France, Brazil, and the US, as well as my total company. So just thinking about efficiency that this can introduce. And if you are currently being asked for monthly board reports, but you're only able to produce them quarterly, or it takes you a long time to actually be able to produce them monthly, this is a really great way to speed up that process. So that is all for the demonstration. We are happy to follow up with any questions that have popped up, but at this point, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Justin.
Yep. Thank you very much, Haley. And firstly, I just want to say that Haley really powered through there. She's dealing with some sickness, but that's what we do here at Revelwood. We power through, right? So hopefully everyone saw how powerful, flexible, and especially how easy Adaptive is to use. And we have plenty of resources that we can make available to you, such as a one-on-one demonstration that speaks more to your specific needs. We can offer up ROI sessions. I wasn't supposed to change that. To quantify the value of the investment, we can offer hands-on workshops and even get your hands on a trial as well. So just let us know what makes sense for you, and we can connect in a meeting. We do encourage you to learn more about Revelwood and our implementation approach by visiting our website at revelwood.com. While you're there, we also encourage you to visit our Knowledge Center, where we offer tips and tricks about all aspects of the planning process, technical tips on the tool, planning tips about the budgeting process in general, and various tips on other business aspects of your FP&A model. I'm aware that some of you may have been here because you have an active initiative to get into a cloud FP&A solution. Some of you may just be here to learn, or you're curious. Either way, we would greatly appreciate you taking 15 minutes with us in the next few days or so, just to have a quick chat with our team to see what your current challenges are, if you have any feedback for us, and whether there's any resources that we can follow up with that I mentioned. So thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it. Once again, one of my colleagues will probably be reaching out for a 15-minute follow-up call if you can make the time. We sincerely hope to speak to you soon, and have a great rest of the day.